I've had a request for an upload on taking a pillion. Now, I don't have a pillion at the moment because I don't have a friend. I'm out because my students are out on tests and it's just me. This is usually when I do my uploads. So let's talk about having a pillion, even though I haven't got one right now. Taking a pillion is something that lots of people worry about, and it really can change the balance of the bike, but it depends how good your pillion is and how smooth you can be with your own riding. When you add extra weight to the bike, particularly on the back, the front end is going to become quite light and wobbly, particularly at slow speeds when you're stopping. Where we would train you to use your rear brake at the end of the stop and only put one foot down, you may find that you want to use the front brake and put both your feet down to steady the bike more, which is absolutely fine, but you've got to be super gentle with that front brake. So if you're choosing to use the front brake to allow yourself to steady the bike with both feet as you're coming into land, it's perfectly fine, but you've got to be really gentle with it, because if you're harsh with the front brake as you're stopping, you're more likely to overbalance the bike, especially if your handlebars are ever so slightly turned. So if you're taking a pillion, everything needs to be super smooth. You'll feel it most when you're riding slowly, so that's when moving off and stopping. Once you're actually moving, it's okay. Provided your pillion has been directed to keep their feet on the foot pegs at all times, not take their feet off when you stop, because that will overbalance the bike. To sit still and not overly lean when you're going slowly, because again that will make the bike wander. To lean with you when you are actually cornering roundabouts, etc. They need to lean with you, but to generally sit still otherwise. The worst part for me when taking a pillion is actually the pillion climbing on and off the bike, and that's because I'm short. So I'm not a tall person, and I'm also not a strong person. I'm a small, spindly little thing. Well, not as spindly as I used to be, but you know. I'm not especially muscular. Whilst you're holding the bike up, the pillion is then going to put their weight on the left side of the bike to then fling their right leg over to sit on the bike. And if they really push down on the left side of the bike as they fling over, it can be really quite difficult to hold that bike upright if you're small and the bike is heavy and then the pillion is heavy. The technique for it is not to sit in the seat, it's more to stand and grip the bike between your knees. But even then, I still find it hard to hold the bike steady. So I always ask my pillions to very gently and gingerly climb on, and if possible to sort of post their leg over and then shuffle themselves into position, because that helps me. Now if you're a big strapping bloke or a big strapping lady, you're not going to have the same problem that I have. Once the pillion is on the bike, I'm perfectly fine. It takes quite a bit of practice to gain confidence in stopping and slow speed manoeuvring with somebody else on the back, because your balance does change. The front end does go light, so it's not so easy to hold the handlebars where you want them to be as you're doing slow speed riding. So if you're in slow moving traffic, for example, it's going to weave a little bit more at the front end. So make sure your tyre pressures are good, you've adjusted them for taking extra weight on the bike, and try to practice. It's something that I don't do enough of because I don't very often have the need to take people on the back of a bike. So even when I do it, I feel that I get a bit tense and I don't really enjoy it as much as I would enjoy riding on my own. But I think for most people, particularly people who are bigger than me and stronger than me, it wouldn't be so much of an issue, because you wouldn't be so frightened of dropping the bike, whereas I'm a little bit more worried about bringing it into a stop and holding the bike up, etc. One of the things I found that helped was piling my bike up with loads of camping gear and riding around with that on the back, which was extra weight, which helped me to get used to what it's like to have a much heavier bike. Admittedly, that weight doesn't move around like a pillion might, but then a good pillion doesn't move around. planning your stops is quite important. So if you can bring your speed down on the approach to your stops with a pillion on the back, so you're not going in at a fast speed and then suddenly stopping, which again will overbalance, or it might result in you using the front brake harshly, which could then result in overbalancing. It's all in the planning stages, keeping those revs up for moving off because you've got extra weight. It's my student out on test. So plan your braking, start slowing it down a little bit earlier and more gently. Whether you're finishing on the rear brake or the front brake with both your feet down, you're going slower and it's smoother. Ideally, you want to be so smooth that at no point does the pillion headbutt you or feel uncomfortable when you're accelerating. Do remember that the comfort of the pillion is quite important. Being on a motorbike is something that some people are quite nervous about. They deserve the smoothest ride possible. So be smooth with your acceleration, be super smooth with your braking. If they headbutt you, it's your fault, and it's usually because you've rolled off the throttle too quickly or you've applied your brakes too sharply. If you can feel them gripping you really hard when you're accelerating, well, maybe you're accelerating too harshly and they're not comfortable. Everything you do will be magnified when you add extra weight to the bike with a pillion. So if you're approaching your junction, ease off earlier. Start your braking really gently but a little bit earlier. Bring your speed down. And with enough planning, you may not need to stop anyway. But remember, at those slow speeds as you approach the junction, it's going to feel different with that pillion on the back. The front end is going to feel lighter. And depending on how still they're sitting as you're going at those slower speeds, and whether they're paying attention as to when you want to start to lean and turn, it might affect your balance. The best advice I can give you is to find a light pillion with whom you can practice. So try practicing with somebody who's relatively light before you start taking people who are a bit heavier. You won't really feel your pillion when you're riding at higher speeds, provided they're leaning with you around your bends. And it can be quite a nice and enjoyable experience for both of you, provided you're being nice and smooth. So enjoy the experience and keep practicing so that you can build your confidence with it. The more you do it, the easier it gets. The smoother you can be, the more you'll enjoy it and the more the pillion will enjoy it.